Guts and Blackpowder is a developing game where you have to fight against hordes of relentless zombies. To help you survive, players are given 7 different classes to choose from, and within those classes various items that can replace the default tool of a certain category. The weapons and utilities that exist in the game are mostly aimed to set the theme of the Napoleonic era. So when it comes to what kind of items players can hope or expect to see in future Guts and Blackpowder updates, the main thing to consider is if it's related to the time period. However, it's not always just historical accuracy that determines whether something gets added to the game. Sometimes a concept might not get added due to issues with balancing or other more complicated reasons. One such weapon that can be brought into the topic of discussion is the hand mortar, a type of firearm that was most prevalent during the 17th and 18th century and was primarily designed to hurl grenades at longer distances than what could be achieved by hand throwing, essentially making it a precursor to modern grenade launchers. The hand mortar is something that has been brought up before, particularly in a video on YouTube called Guts and Blackpowder Weapon Ideas, made by BarnacleBot. In this video, BarnacleBot talks about various item designs that could be in the game, and in one of those ideas, he mentions something called the hand cannon, which may or may not directly be based off of the hand mortar. Regardless, Fez, the prominent developer of GNB, does make a comment on the hand mortar, saying that it would probably be useless and difficult to use. Both the video and comment were made a year ago, and as far as I know, the developers have not said anything else about the hand mortar apart from Fez's comment here. I'm not in the Discord or anything, so why did I make this? I don't know, I just felt like it. Okay, so you know what this video is going to be about. I'm going to talk about the hand mortar in GNB conceptually. What would it do and how would it work? So I have this terrible drawing here of a hand mortar, and like many other firearms in the game, hand mortars had different models throughout history. The one that I based this design off is a flintlock that I don't think has a specific model name, but there is a video on it made by this guy. What it would do seems obvious, it would just shoot grenades, right? Well, it's worth noting that the hand mortar could also be used to throw other small explosives or incendiary projectiles, laden projectiles like a scattershot, and line weights or grappling hooks on a ship. But for the sake of simplicity, let's just say that it only fires hand grenades. As for what class it would belong to, I think it's quite agreeable that this weapon would be used by the seaman as a primary. Not only were hand mortars historically more prominent with the Navy, but the gun generally just fits the criteria for being a crowd control weapon. I have here drawings of the hand mortar when it's in the player's inventory. Like with any other gun, it would be mounted on the left side of the user's back when unequipped. When equipped and loaded with black powder, the user holds the mortar in the right hand and a grenade in the left if they have any. If the mortar has been fired and is powder empty, they will hold the flintlock with both hands close to their chest. Now, the more challenging question is how exactly would it work? The shooting process is more complicated than any other gun where you would just pull the trigger and fire a pellet. The hand mortar was usually an operation requiring 2 people, one person directly using the motor and the other handling the grenade. For obvious reasons, the hand mortar in GNB would be operated by only the person equipping the weapon. As said before, the ammunition consists of grenades, but the grenades that come with the hand mortar would be separate from the actual grenade utility in the shop. It would be pretty lame if using a certain weapon required equipping a certain utility for it to work. If the item is in the player's inventory, there would be a visual GUI that shows how much ammunition they have, similar to grenade's utility or water bucket, and you would have a carrying limit of 3 grenades. Alternatively, the GUI could appear only when the hand mortar is equipped in the user's hand. Now, you might be thinking that the ammunition capacity of the hand mortar is too little, but I'll talk more about this later. Before that, I want to talk about how this weapon reloads. First, the user will pour powder into the priming pan using their powder horn. Then they will pour powder into the primary charge. After that, they're done. Yep, that's pretty much it. The reload of the hand motor is only a 2-step process, potentially making it the fastest reloading gun of any other flintlock. You're probably wondering though, where's the grenade? Well, it would actually be part of the shooting process and not technically part of the reload. After the weapon is primed and charged, the user can click the firing input to start preparing the grenade. The user will put the motor in the right underarm, bring out a match with the right hand to fuse the grenade, put the match away, put the motor back in hand, place the grenade, and the user will position the weapon to which it can be fired by clicking. Yeah, I wasn't kidding when I said that the shooting process would be more complicated than any other gun. To be fair, the actual reload of the hand motor is very quick, so when you pair this with the preparation of the grenade, the time it takes to fire the weapon from the start of reload would be around 8 to 10 seconds, if not faster. The grenades used with the hand motor would have properties very similar to the grenade utility item. It would have a fuse time of 5 seconds, it can be cooked inside the cup, it can explode on the user and kill them if stalled for too long, it would drop to the ground near the player if they are interrupted, and the damage and radius of the explosion would be the same. One thing to note is that the amount of time you have to fire the grenade once it's in the motor would be less than hand-thrown grenades, since it's already been cooked for a bit during preparation, perhaps 1 second. The main difference between motor-thrown and hand-thrown grenades would be 2 things: the distance the grenade travels and the properties of directly hitting things. The first point is simple. Grenades launched from the motor would travel much further than grenades thrown by hand. As for the second point, I'll have to bring up how grenades interact in the current game. These projectiles have physics and can collide with surfaces. When they do, they bounce around for a bit before coming to a full stop. Grenades can even collide with zombies, although throwing it at one won't really do anything other than just bounce off of them and land wherever. With the hand motor, grenades would directly hit and damage zombies. With this idea in mind, we can move on to the stats of the hand motor with values indicating the performance of the grenade as a bullet. It would have a base damage of 300, a base reload of 3 to 4 seconds, considering only the priming and charging. It would have a penetration of 1, max distance of 300, and moderate accuracy. For the most part, these stats are all debatable, especially the range and accuracy, since I kind of just randomly decided them. However, the choice of values for the damage and penetration are very significant. One of the important aspects of a Seaman firearm is that it can deal high damage, which is particularly useful against zapper zombies. So when choosing how much damage a grenade should deal on direct hit, it should be high enough to instantly take out those tanks, especially on hardcore. The hand motor can only hit up to 2 zombies per shot, and you might think that less penetration on a weapon is worse. For the most part, that's correct, but with the hand motor, it would actually be better. To explain how hand motor launched grenades would even interact with zombies, you first have the single penetration, hitting through one enemy and then traveling until they hit a second enemy or a surface. If the grenade hits a surface, it will bounce around like normal and land wherever. But if it hits another enemy, then the projectile will drop straight to the ground where the target was hit, fusing until it goes off. I should mention that the grenade as a bullet will only deal damage if it hasn't hit 2 targets first or collided with other surfaces. What makes the low penetration ideal for the hand motor is that it's easier to shoot the grenades into a spot where a crowd of zombies will be, having higher chance to blow them up. If the hand motor has high penetration, then the grenades fired from it would just travel further past the crowd, hitting nothing with the explosion. As for the reload, it would only make sense that the priming and charging would take little time, with the preparation of the grenade taking more time away from actually firing the weapon. With the stats of the hand motor covered, it's time to go back to what I was saying about the ammunition of the weapon. With a capacity of 3 grenades, it seems like this weapon runs out of use pretty quickly, which is why there would be a mechanic that allows hand motor users to refill their ammunition, apart from New Waves and Endless and certain sections of the Roscoff map. The way you refill the ammunition would be similar to how surgeons refill their medical supplies, attacking zombies and getting drops from them when they die. However, this is grenades that we're talking about, and it wouldn't really make sense for any zombie to just drop a military explosive, since most of them are civilians. Therefore, unlike medical supplies, hand motor users can only get ammunition drops from sapper zombies, infected who are literally soldiers and would have a high chance of carrying grenades. To gain ammunition drops from zappers, you would have to deal damage to them before they die. Any damage source would work, whether it's your melee, utilities, or even the hand motor itself, but you still have to pick up the supplies wherever the target died. You could also say that ammunition should drop from regimental shamblers or runners, but just to keep it simple, sapper zombies would exclusively be the ones to drop them in this design. Although they aren't exactly rare, they are still the only zombie type to supply the hand motor, so it would be fair for hand motor users to have guaranteed drops when they attack them. The stats, properties, and mechanics of the hand motor with this design would make it quite unique compared to any other firearm, drastically changing the playstyle of a seaman while not exactly changing what seaman weapons are good for. The hand motor is still a high damage gun that can be great for taking out many zombies instantly, but the way it does this is different from the other three firearms. Generally, the blunderbuss and navy pistol are great at taking out a crowd of zombies that are not only bunched up, but also formed as a linear group, relatively ideal to the player's position. Alternatively, the hand motor deals high damage in a radius of a certain spot instead of a directional and spread out attack. This weapon is also risky to use. You could potentially damage or straight up kill yourself if you don't handle it wisely, or you just get unlucky. You wouldn't want to use this weapon in tight circumstances where firing a grenade would potentially land close to you and you can't run away from it. There's honestly a lot of things that could change or be improved upon the hand motor, and there were a lot of different ideas that I had initially for this concept. The ammunition, for example. There could have been infinite grenades instead with no meter, maybe passively regenerating grenades, or having straight up limited use similar to the air rifle. In the end, I settled on the resupply from zappers since this seems to make the most sense and is most interesting, at least to me. I also mentioned that the hand motors could fire things other than grenades. There could be a mechanic where you can switch between what you fire, perhaps the default projectile being large iron balls like cannonballs or round shot, whereas the grenades are a special ammunition. But again, just to keep it simple, I stuck with only grenades in the general concept. There's not many ways you could change the way that the reload and firing works as described earlier with the hand motor. Maybe there could be a change in animation, like the user putting the fuse grenade first before placing the gun in both hands, or the user would be operating the firearm with a long strap going around their neck, so they can let go of the hand motor when fusing the grenade with the match and easily put it back into hand. I could only think of one way that the shooting process of the gun would be drastically different from the way I described. Instead of fusing the grenade while in hand, the user would put an unfused grenade into the cup, potentially as part of the reload step, and when they decide to shoot, they would light the grenade inside the cup and be able to fire, essentially saving lots of time from the preparation of the initial idea. However, there's just no records that hand motors were ever used this way, plus, this seems too dangerous and ridiculous. Again, the stats are debatable, but the damage of the hand motor should generally be very high and the penetration low. I also don't see how the properties of the hand motor's grenades should be any different from the grenade utility. There's no change to the fuse time, explosion radius, or mechanics that would make it any more interesting. With all that said about this concept, I want to talk about whether or not the hand motor would be justified in the game, both in historical accuracy and gameplay. As said in the beginning, the hand motor was most prevalent in the 17th and 18th century, but for the most part, they had been abandoned by the Napoleonic era due to safety issues. If the hand motor were to misfire, the user would essentially be carrying a fused grenade with no time to try again. making them quite dangerous for the user and their friends. This historical issue wouldn't actually be a big deal when it comes to the weapon's existence in the game, when you consider that the knock gun is already in G&B. Historically, the knock volley gun was used by the Royal Navy during the early Napoleonic Wars, but they were eventually discontinued due to their shoulder-breaking recoil. Despite this, the knock gun still managed to find its implementation into the game, with players just being pushed back a little when firing it. Since misfiring doesn't even exist in G&B along with friendly fire against teammates not existing, the hand motor's safety issue could be neglected just like the knock gun's recoil, although players can still damage themselves. Now to talk about the gameplay aspect of this weapon, with the obvious goal of it being balanced. Competent, but not too powerful. I definitely don't think that this weapon would be too strong or a must-have when you consider the drawbacks that it has. Delayed firing, ammunition capacity requiring resupply, and mechanics that can damage or even kill the player. With these kinds of disadvantages, the more significant question is if it's too impractical. We also have to consider how grenades fired from the hand motor compare to normal hand-thrown grenades. Well, you pretty much just have more range and direct damage with the projectile, along with resupply over the grenade's utility. But do these benefits hold up? Going back to what Fez commented in BarnacleBot's video, he said that the grenades do not explode on impact, and aiming them to blow up in the right spot would be pretty difficult. I'm assuming that this is the main reason why a hand motor might not be useful. Going back to the design, the low penetration of the grenade as a bullet is meant to stop the object's trajectory early and have it drop right where the second target is hit, comfortably landing near the front of a zombie crowd. And you wouldn't have to try to aim this thing at the ground to get the correct positioning, or worry about it bouncing off zombies to wherever like with hand-thrown grenades. However, you still have to keep the fuse time in mind when firing it. If fired too early, zombies might just walk past it or move unpredictably and be unaffected. Attempting to cook the grenade right until it's about to go off would be too risky and require too much precision for what it's worth. Plus, cooking the grenade for so long might result in whatever you were aiming at already being dead, scattered, or overwhelming you in some way. So, the hand motor in this design might still be too difficult to use, failing to address the main problem that Fez mentions. The improvement that needs to be made for this weapon is blowing up crowds easier. There are probably multiple ways that this could be done, but the idea I came up with has to do with the fuse time of a launched grenade being reduced whenever it directly hits a zombie. Basically, for every target that the bullet directly damages, the time it takes for the grenade to explode will immediately be reduced by 1 second. Since the bullet can hit up to 2 targets before falling straight to the ground, this means that the fuse time can be immediately reduced by up to 2 seconds. Assuming that the maximum cook time you have with the hand motor is about 4 seconds, this means that the user would only have to cook the grenade for about 2 seconds, and if they manage to hit 2 targets directly, then the grenade will practically just explode on impact. This seems a bit unrealistic, but I think it helps the weapon be more useful without being too ridiculous with the explode on impact effect. You would still have to have some sense of foresight when using the weapon. Overall, this item would just be another Seaman primary alternative that just happens to be a bit more unique than other weapons. And it's something that people can just use to change up their playstyle and have fun with it. After all, like many other video game elements, the point of item variety is to help games be more engaging, especially in an experience like G&B, where once you move past the first time experience, you pretty much just play the same maps over and over again. This took way more time to make than it probably should have, especially for something that's probably never going to be added into the game. I'd like to know what you guys think. Do you think that the hand motor deserves to be in Guts and Blackpowder? If there's some kind of item or concept that you personally would like to see, what would it be?